good morning, and thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you very much for being here at 9 a.m. Thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation to participate in this wonderful conference, and congratulations for the organization of this conference. It's amazing. So I will start this presentation. Sorry, I think I have to change the... Okay, here. So I will start this presentation on intersectional perspectives on gender and sexualities, representations, methodologies, and applications. And I will show how visual representations and the digital may be useful for understanding, analyzing, and teaching on intersectional inequalities. First, I will focus on the conceptual framework, specifically focusing on situated intersectionality and on the emotional perspectives to inequalities. Then I will focus on 2 dimensions of intersectionality, positions and effects, and then present a proposal on how to visualize them. So first of all, in relation to situated intersectionality, building on debates that were taking place within the Black feminist movement in the US, the concept of intersectionality, as you may know, was introduced as such by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989 as a way of describing the interconnections existing between race and gender in Black women. It has expanded to theorize a wide range of intersecting axes of inequality, such as sexual orientation, class, or age in a variety of disciplines. And its main arguments could be summarized as that the experiences of oppression cannot be understood from a single axis framework, so that the experiences, for example, of Black women can be understood only focusing on race or only focusing on gender. Also, that there are relations of mutual constitution between different axes, which means that we cannot add Black to women, for example, but that their interrelation creates specific configurations of inequalities. Also, that we are all positioned in all power structures, so that there are no neutrals. For example, men have gender and white people have ethnicity, and also that we are simultaneously positioned in positions of privilege and oppression at the same time. Also that the effects of our positions vary in relation to time and space, so that the effects of sexism, for example, are not the same at home that in public spaces. And in this sense, in relation to the study of gender and sexualities, intersectional perspective is crucial to understand how gender and sexuality are mutually constructed, and also in relation to other axes of inequalities. Vale, yes, sorry, so this was the slide. So now, in relation to the politics of knowledge production of the concept, placing intersectionality at the core of Black feminism and highlighting the specific voices and bodies from which it arises is central to avoid whitewashing and ignoring Black women as the producers of knowledge and as an active players in the fight against discrimination. And it's especially central nowadays in a time when intersectionality is being used and also co-opted by institutions and academia. Also, at the same time, from a global perspective, the theory of intersectionality arising in the United States should be also situated against a global backdrop of economic, political, and cultural imperialism, and within a context of English-speaking hegemony in knowledge production. In other contexts, at a similar period as in the US, other proposals that interrelated different axes of oppression appeared from marginalized collectives. As an example, already in the 19th century, there were women denouncing the violence that they were suffering because of positions of oppression in multiple layers, as indigenous, for example, as poor, as Black, and it was happening in Latin America, but also in other places like in Kurdistan, in Catalonia, or in the Basque country, already in the 70s. In this sense, I think that it's important to differentiate between intersectionality as a theory related to Black feminism in the US, and intersectionality like thought as an action and as a phenomenon of a genuine development of political practices and theorizations on the relation between axes of inequality. And it has, I think, political implications, and in relation to research, I think that it's important to situate intersectionality in our specific context, and to be aware of these dynamics of Anglocentrism in academia. And now the second issue is the emotional perspectives to inequalities. Political and social research on intersectionality and on inequalities is generally focused on the public sphere of life, ignoring emotions as a relevant field for studying inequalities. However, emotions are deeply related to experiences of discrimination and to power dynamics in general, and they can reveal unexpressed or normalized inequalities too. As an example, just think about inequality indicators like life expectancy or salary. Most of them try to show inequality through numbers that seem objective. However, many discriminations related to homophobia, sexism, and racism also have to do with emotions such as humiliation, fear, or exclusion. But how can we approach such discriminations in a way that shows existing inequalities? I use Sarah Ahmed's conceptualization of comfort and discomfort as holistic emotions to develop the relation between intersectionality and the emotional dimension. As she argues in relation to whiteness, to be comfortable is to be at ease with one's environment, that is hard to distinguish where one's body ends and the world begins. One fits, and by fitting, the surfaces of bodies disappear from view. Based on this specific conceptual framework, my aim here is to show you part of this new project that I am developing on how to map intersecting inequalities from an emotional and geographic perspective. Funded by the European Research Council, Intermaps is conducted by an interdisciplinary research team and has the aim of creating, and one of the aims is of creating new tools for the conceptualization, analysis, and visualization of inequalities. After the theoretical and methodological developments that I'm not going to focus here on the most theoretical part, we will apply these new tools that now I'm going to show you to empirical research with a sample of 1,000 people in Catalonia. At least this is what we want to do. We'll see what happens. The idea here is to go beyond the study of concrete axes and also go beyond the study of specific groups, which is what has been mainly done in intersectionality studies, and consider all dimensions of different axes and across places following an intercategorical approach. Today we will focus on the visual and the digital tools that we have been creating in relation to two dimensions of intersectional relations. First, in relation to positions, which refers to how we represent these intersecting categories such as woman, black, or heterosexual, for example. And secondly, I will focus on the effects dimension, which focuses on how we experience power structures, such as in a way that, so how we experience power structures like patriarchy or racism. So sexism would be one of these effects of these power structures. First, in relation to positions, I will present the metaphor of the basket of apples. The most famous metaphor on intersectionality, as you might know, is Kimberly Crenshaw's crossroad and traffic. There has been an important criticism to this metaphor, probably due to misunderstanding of Crenshaw's metaphor, because she was absolutely clear on what she wanted to address regarding intersectionality. But Crenshaw's metaphor focuses on the fact that, this criticism on Crenshaw's metaphor focuses on the fact that this metaphor seems to convey an additive model of intersectionality. It relies on considering oppressions of power structures as separate and independent of each other in a way that is only in the crossroad or in the roundabout where different oppressions meet and relate in an additive way. Some other authors have tried to overcome the problem of addition and of the separation between different oppressions by proposing metaphors that try to capture this complex modification of categories in this mutual constitution character of intersectional relations. As an example, Jordan Zachary talks about a marble cake in which it is impossible to separate its components. Maria Lugones, with the aim of resisting the logic of purity of categories, presents the image of an egg, pointing out that we are unable to separate completely its two different parts, so the egg white and the egg yolk. And Lucas Platero, for example, also challenges this conception by presenting the image of a maraña, which I don't know how you translate it into English, which shows this complexity and inseparability of the interrelation. With Marta Jorba, we developed the idea that there's a general concern regarding most of these metaphors, which would be the problem of reification. It is that categories are represented as objects rather than as properties of objects. The proposed metaphors try to present social categories as less reified, so as less objects, by making the boundaries of things porous or relating things in complex ways. They all lead us to thinking that the road, the gel, and the filters, or the egg yolk exist as separate units prior to the mix, the crush, or the contact. In our view, this creates an imaginary that moves away from visualizing the mutual constitutive character of intersectionality and precisely reinforces what intersectionality wanted to overcome, that is, conceiving race and gender as discrete strands. This led us to the creation of the metaphor of the apple, or the basket of apples, where the different properties of the apple, so its color, its size, its taste, for example, would be the different categories. For example, color could be gender and size could be race. So they are always present and they all configure the apple as a whole, but they are conceived as properties and not as objects that cross or that interrelate at some point. So based on this theoretical framework of this properties framework and in the basket of apples metaphor, which is just like a theoretical, philosophical, and conceptual proposal, then with this project Intermaps, taking inspiration from the Canner's New York City project led by Francesca Berardi, and also of Giorgia Lupi, a data humanist that works on data visualization, we have developed a digital tool to visualize profile data based on this idea of the apple. So when collecting profile data through the website, and I will show you how this website works. So when we are collecting profile data regarding positions of gender, sexual orientation, or religion, something like an avatar is being created based on the apple metaphor. For example, the left part of the apple refers to gender, the right part refers to race, and the seeds in the center refer to age. So each seed would be like a decade, like every 10 years you have a seed. And the pill refers to sexual orientation, and every element here in the apple refers to a different axis. So each participant will have a different apple based on their positions in different power structures, and also in relation to some other characteristics that we ask for, such as participation in social movements. So we are not only representing like positions in relation to power structures, but also other characteristics that we are asking. We have had many discussions on how to visualize positions in a way that it's non-hierarchical and also in a way that shows both oppression and privilege, and also this mutual constitution character of intersecting positions. In this sense, for example, privilege is always represented in a similar color, this yellow color, or also in a normative way, so what is like more similar to an apple. So it can be easily identified like this one in this example. So this one would be a person with different positions of privilege in contrast to this one. So the idea is that the privileged positions lead to a more boring apple in a way, which was also a decision that we made. And also reminding Barcelona's typical floors, the corners, when you just collect and when you put together all these apples, the corners show the participation in social movements. So if you participate in social movements, you have like more of these dots, full dots. And thus it creates something like a mosaic that relates people through their actions and not their identities, which also tries to overcome identity politics. So what creates bridges between us, it's not what we are, but what we do or the movements where we participate in. So this would be in relation to how we visualize positions and in relation to intersectionality, trying to base this visualization on all these theoretical developments on intersectionality. And now in relation to the effects dimension, I will present the relief maps model. So the relief maps are a proposal that I created some years ago for collecting, analyzing, and visualizing geographic data on inequalities, emotions, and intersectionality. This is an example of it, and as you can see, it relates 3 different dimensions. The social dimension, which would be intersecting power structures, the different lines and colors that you can see here. The geographic dimension, that would be places in the x-axis, and then the psychologic, that would be emotions from comfort downwards to discomfort upwards. They show the curves of systemic and systematic discomforts due to various positions in diverse spaces of the everyday life. So every dot is placed by each individual in a gradation of comfort to discomfort, and it is related to emotions such as fear, humiliation, or exclusion. In that sense, emotions here are considered as pointers to more structural inequalities. The name relief maps highlights 2 of the meanings that it has in English. Relief as an accentuation, which would be the hills, the curves that rise up and show the places of oppression, and then relief as alleviation or removal of pain, which would refer to the valleys and to those places where oppressive experiences decline and that culminate with these places of relief. Thus, the concept of relief shows this dynamism and mobility between places and experiences according to the different structures that intersect. The relief maps were created as a tool to be used by hand, by participants. First, they had to reflect on their experiences in every place of their everyday life in relation to their different social positions. Then they classified the spaces in 4 types, that was the second step, to finally draw their own relief map. This has been used in several projects, but then I created the digital tool of the relief maps, which has importantly expanded its potentialities also through technology. So we created this website, reliefmaps.cat. It has 2 main functions. As a researcher, you can create your own model of the relief maps, choosing the categories you want to work with, and also the places. You can use the ones proposed, or you can create also the new ones. And once you have defined them, you send a link to your participants. And here they can take part of it with a code, and then participants have to fill in a form like this, explaining how they feel in every place by each category, selecting the emotions related to it, and situating the dot in a gradation of comfort to discomfort. So here you can see an example of the screen for home and sexual orientation. And then a relief map like this is automatically generated, and it can be seen and downloaded by the researcher together with the comments related to each dot. The data is available in the form of a relief map, but also as an Excel, allowing for a deeper analysis of the data, both from a qualitative and a quantitative perspective. And I also have to say that this website is free and public, so you can use it also as researchers for free. So the relief maps are a proposal for the collection and visualization of data on intersecting inequalities from a geographical and emotional perspective, and they are also a model for analyzing and conceptualizing intersectionality. They are a tool for empirical research on the effects of intersecting inequalities. Place is considered as constitutive in intersectional dynamics and a central element that shows a dynamism of power relations. It also goes beyond additive conceptions of intersectionality. There is no reinforcement of categories. For example, we are not using woman, man, or trans, but we are using just gender as the power structure, so we are not reinforcing specific categories. Privilege and oppression are always taken into account, and they also allow for a great variety of categories to be considered. Another important issue is that they imply a deep reflection on oppression, privilege, and inequalities for the participants, with what has an important transformative potential during the research process. And finally, it's important to know that they are not an end in themselves, but material to be analyzed. That's also why they are not a graphic, but a map or a drawing of the subjective perception of inequalities. I will now present just some examples from a research we carried out with 88 teenagers from the Barcelona province to show the potentialities of this way of visualizing the effects of intersecting inequalities in this specific context. So here you can see the relief map of a bisexual atheist white woman. You can see the very accentuated curves she drew for sexual orientation in green, but also for gender in this red-brown color and origin in yellow. In relation to sexual orientation at home, she says, "Recently, I had the courage to explain my sexual orientation to my parents. They didn't take it well. My mother's partner made very homophobic comments." In relation to gender in public space, she says, "In my opinion, the street is where I feel less respected as a woman. I have been chased, shouted things from a car, whispered, and some have also touched my body without consent." And in relation to origin, religion, and nationality in public space, she says, "I have received some denigrating comments, but as I am white-faced, I have never received too many bad comments." As you can see, here she expresses her feelings of discomfort that are linked to diverse social processes of exclusion and discrimination in the city, such as the process of heteronormalization. In my previous work with young lesbians, the homophobic attitudes from parents appear both as central for processes of victimization for youth in private spaces, but also as clear limitations for their access to public space. A young lesbian that must hide her sexual orientation to her family won't be able to express her sexual orientation in public space neither, for the fear of being seen by them. Here, the economic status and the possibilities of emancipation are crucial for this situation too, as well as emotional dependency of youth to their families. She's also referring to fear in public space, which is in itself a restriction to women's mobility in the cities, and the intersection here between age and gender is especially relevant for the configuration of this kind of fear in public space. Also, the where, when, why, and whom women feel fearful are central elements for the reproduction of gender violence and are also important barriers for implementing successful prevention plans. In relation to origin and ethnicity, her relief map shows the processes of racialization of migrant youth and the diverse configurations of racial discrimination. In this line, there's another example. Here you can see how this young Muslim man feels discriminated because of his religious identity in public space. He says, "It depends on the spaces. Sometimes I get discriminated, but normally good." You can see how the yellow line is now quite accentuated in public space, but also in high school and in social networks. This points to racialization processes too and their interconnections with religious identity and migration processes, which would be also linked to the processes of securitization of the urban space. He also expressed that he had received Islamophobic comments after terrorist attacks, pointing at him as a potential terrorist. This was happening in high school. So these examples are also related to these broader processes that link the everyday experiences of youth in a high school to these international geopolitics that could be related to these terrorist attacks, for example. And another one in relation to physical appearance, where this young man says, in relation to physical appearance at high school, he says, "At the Institute, I feel bad about my physical appearance because during 4 years I have suffered bullying because of my skin problems." It shows also how physical appearance, which is an axis that we are going to also to add in this new project of Intermaps, can be also the cause of important discriminations and violence with intense psychological and physical effects. In this sense, these discomforts point at central aspects related to the social conditionings of health, for example, and although my perspective is not psychological, the approach would have clear potentialities for understanding how social positions and discriminations deeply affect human well-being. There would be like many interesting relief maps that show the complexity of these positions and the effects of in relation to these positions, and that show how inequality is felt and lived. But here I also want to focus on another kind of relief maps, what I call the maps of silence. Here you can see the relief map of a heterosexual white Catholic young man. His lines are all flat lines, showing his privilege in the different places of his everyday life. In relation to his sexual orientation, for example, he just says good or even nothing. and healing emotions such as acceptance, freedom, protection, or safety. And here another one, very similar. They seem less interesting than the others, but I think that it's interesting to show how privilege is spatially configured too and how it reproduces inequalities. These flat lines are first of all lines of silence, lines and dots empty of words and empty of feelings. So here visually we are also representing how privilege is constructed and how privilege is lived from this intersectional perspective, which is basically a lack of this awareness of where the own body ends and the world begins that Sarah Ahmed was talking about. And it is visually seen through this emptiness and this silence in relation to emotions. So now with Intermaps, with this ongoing project, our aim is to improve this model of the relief maps by adding new elements and basically integrating qualitative, quantitative, and spatial analysis approaches. So after asking this profile information that I showed you through this apple metaphor, we will follow the relief maps model with the participants. With the new tool, however, the screens of the form disappear and participants only have this one screen where they move the dots upwards and downwards directly and they write their comments in relation to every dot. The aim here was to allow for more places and more categories to be considered. So we will have 9 categories and 9 different places, which are a lot. And also we wanted to make it more interactive with the idea of using the power of the visual also to enhance the reflection process of participants and to collect more nuanced data. So we are trying to use these digital tools and this visual, the power of the visual as also a tool for collecting data. Here you can see how they will write their comments and select the emotions, and also how they will add categories. So this is how this specific model of the relief maps has been thought. But then there are some new elements that we want to add to this digital tool. And this is specifically this georeferentiated data on lived experiences. So you have seen that here we were considering spaces like home or public space as abstract concepts that you have to, participants have to explain how they feel in these different spaces, but we don't have like a specific situation of home or of specific public spaces. So now we wanted also to create like real maps in relation to the lived experience. And here we took the amazing works of feminist GIS scholars such as May Pok Wan, and also references from other researchers that have been working on critical perspective to geographical information systems, mainly coming from feminist, queer, anti-racist, decolonial, and humanistic perspectives. There's a really interesting debate on how we use these technologies in relation to these critical perspectives and critical theory, and we also are trying to relate with these discussions, with these theoretical discussions on how we produce specific softwares or specific technologies for collecting data on inequalities. So based on this, there will be a last screen where participants will be able to identify specific places of their everyday life and add comments and emotions. Some of the decisions made from this critical perspective include, for example, the use of circles of these zones instead of dots, with the aim of avoiding some ethical problems in relation or data protection problems in relation to the possibility of re-identification of participants, and also with the aim of considering scale from lived experience. So our lived experience in relation to specific places is not as a dot, but sometimes it's like a zone. And we also wanted to be able to take this kind of information from participants. So for example, here you can both select like a square in your city or also a whole country. So you can say that in a whole country, so in a very big area, you have a specific experience. So with this, we will have georeferentiated data that combines textual narrative, because participants will be able to write specific comments in relation to every dot or to every circle, points and also areas with geographic coordinates, and places with unknown or more vague locations to capture precisely these complex qualities of place and scale in relation to the lived experiences of intersectional inequalities. Okay, so finally, as you have seen, I have presented a work in progress, and I know it was risky for this kind of presentation, but I also wanted to hear your feedback on this. We don't have the results from the empirical work yet. We will start the next course collecting data. But I think that the design of the new tools imply many decisions on how we visualize and on how we represent and design these methodologies in relation to how we are conducting research on intersecting positions and effects. And I think that it can also be useful for research and for teaching on gender and sexuality from an intersectional perspective. So these visual tools are not only have potentialities in relation to research, but also on how we explain these concepts and on how we help this visualization of complex concepts. So here I've tried to show the importance of the intersectional perspective for studies on gender and sexualities, also show the potentialities of the visual and the digital for collecting, analyzing, and displaying data, both in relation to positions and effects, and to argue for how a critical use of diverse methods and spatial analysis techniques might be useful for visualizing intersecting inequalities. And that's all. Thank you very much.